Hello, friends of the Museum of South Texas History. My name is Francisco Guajardo. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the museum. And I'm happy to be with you on this October Ask the Archivist Month Museum Plática. How about that? We've been having Pláticas almost for a couple years, but we had yet to have one that is specific to Ask the Archivist Month. So, what we're going to do today is that we will have Kelly Francis Love, who's the archivist at this museum in Edinburgh. And we will also have a young man who just graduated from college from the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, who happened to have been an employee of the museum for some time when he was an undergraduate student and really took the whole idea of the archives in the museum to heart. And so his name's Kepler. So he's got this like scientific astronomer name. So we're going to figure out the origins of his name. Maybe. I think he knows. And so Kepler and Kelly will be on with me to have a conversation about the archives and the importance of the archives and how Kepler's own experience here at the museum may have affected him in some way. So we're going to come back in a little bit. I'm going to share his story first with you because, I want to personalize this as much as I can. And so at the story and then the segue into a break, and then we'll have the conversation with both Kepler and Kelly. So here's my story. I lost my parents. Jose Angel was my father. He died at the age of 77. My mother was Julia. She died at the age of 85. And so I lost both of them, in the last couple of years, and then about 7-8 years ago, my father, my mother more recently. But one of the real joys, I think, in the twilight of their lives, is that while my father battled cancer in the last months of his life, he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. So it was in many ways just too late by the time the cancer was caught. Fortunately, however, as my father went through the very, very difficult, very painful process of dealing with cancer, I had an archive on my father. I had been for about 15 years collecting my father's story through a series of oral histories that I had conducted with him, interviews. I used to have pláticas with my father and I'd record them. And then, I'd store them in the archive, the oral history of my father that was kind of progressive, became elongated, 15 years old. And so when we went the palliative care way, there's palliative care for people who are very sick and really dying. Nothing worked with palliative care. The nurses would come in, they do drugs on him, like painkillers and that sort of thing. The thing that worked best to assuage, kind of relieve his pain was when I would bring him an interview that I had done with him from 10 years ago, from 12 years ago. And so I got him a big laptop with a big screen because he was also losing his sight. And so he would watch himself and listen to the words and listen to his stories. So in many ways, it helped him to relive his story and to relive in a very celebratory way his own life. And so the archive of my father is what helped him, I think, die with a degree of dignity. So that's kind of a personal story. It's not kind of, it's actually a real personal story. The other story is the story of my mother. So my mother, I had 20 plus years of an oral history with my mother. And so I took my mother in when my father died, and so she lived with my family. And toward the last few years of her life, my mother began to lose her mind. So she had dementia. And so there were days when she woke up and she couldn't remember much. She didn't know who I was, that sort of thing. But there was an oral history that I did with my mother back in, it was like 2014, where in a very kind of concise and pithy way, my mother laid out her life story. And I would play that to her. And that one was especially important because my mother focused on her mother. And so the bond that my mother had with her mother was the one bond that she never severed. They were like tethered for life, whether my mother remembered or forgot or whatever. The one thing that she remembered was her mother. So very much like that Adam Sandler movie with Drew Barrymore, the 50 First Dates or something, where Drew Barrymore would forget because she had had some sort of accident. My mother was a lot like that late in her life. She would forget things. She'd forget, the people in her life. And so I would play that one story for her from her oral history, from my archive. And so it was like the most beautiful thing, because my mom, and then she would see the story, and then mijito, me traes agua, or she would then remember. And that was, in my mother's case, the power of the archive, the power of the oral history. Now, archive means much more than just what I described. It is a very kind of complex enterprise and even industry. And so when we come back, we're going to begin to explore what that industry is like, what the culture is like around archiving, and those kinds of things. So when we come back, we will be joined here around this table where we do museum pláticas. I'll be joined by Kelly Francis Love and also Kepler. And Kepler's last name is Dimas, I think, but we'll do a fact check on that when he comes on. So stay with us. Okay, welcome back, friends of the Museum of South Texas History. My name is Francisco Guajardo from the museum, and I am joined by Kelly. She'll introduce herself shortly. And also Kepler. So while on break, I asked them, is there anything you want me to ask you? Like set you up with something. And so Kepler had some sort of crazy idea. I'll come back to that in a second. But Kelly was very specific. She said, ask me about the oldest item we have in the archives. So what is the oldest item we have in the archives? We'll start with that.
We'll start with that. Okay, so I actually brought it with me because you have not even seen it yet.
Ooh.
So this is actually a brand new donation. This is one that came from Ron Stone in Austin. And this is now the oldest item in the archive. And this is how it came to us. I haven't processed it yet or anything, so this is not necessarily how I would store it, just FYI. But this is a letter from 1791.
Wow.
And so it looks like the person who donated the letter at some point had sent it for some evaluation So the letter that came with it says, attached is the Spanish transcription of your document. It's essentially about the complaint by the native people of, I don't speak Spanish, so
Okay.
Francisco, can you read that for me?
Okay. Oh, yeah. Attached to the Spanish transcription of your document, it essentially is about the complaint by the native people of Barrio de la Encarnación, Ocopulco, present-day Ocopulco, Texcoco, that they were treated disrespectfully by Luis Medina during a recent tribute collection. This is the tercio collection, or the third collection, which occurred 3 times a year by the officers of the Royal Treasury. Wow. This is fascinating stuff. You know, this is, Kelly, thank you for bringing this. No.
You're welcome.
But in many ways, because, you know, there was something that happened when Escandón came in the 1750s. Escandón wasn't trusted by everybody, and especially by the viceroy. And so they used to send these people to go check on him. And so there are all kinds of records of people who would come to inspect, like inspectors. And so a lot of what we know, for example, there's this like 1757 record of how the inspector came to look at, you know, these town sites that the Escandón expedition was creating, and they comment on the hurricane. They comment on the floods. Like, this place was sparsely populated, and yet it was flooding. You know, and the hurricane. And so some of those records, and one might think, well, so what about the flood of the hurricane? But actually, this is interesting history. Because, you know, it floods and we get hurricanes today. But a lot of that we know because of documents such as these. So this was somebody who was coming through here doing like 3 times a year reports on the colony.
Yes. So this is a great document in any number of ways. I mean, first of all, because now it's our oldest document, 1791. I think before this, our oldest document was probably mid-1800s, maybe early 1800s. But this is our first 1700s document in the archive. But then it also talks about the native peoples, which is something we don't have much about in the archives at all. So this is a really, really great document. I'm glad it was donated. Like I said, it was a very recent donation, so I haven't had a chance to process it yet or anything. But once I do, I'm sure there will be more information available for people if they want to know more.
Wow. So 1791, I mean, the United States was just born. This was a colony of Spain. This is fascinating stuff. All right. So, Kelly, for the audience that, although I think that I kind of feel like people know you, right? You think people know you?
Well, I can introduce myself.
Yeah.
For the people that don't know me.
Yes.
So I am Kelly Francis Love. I am the archivist here at the museum. I am originally from Columbus, Ohio, but I have been here since November of 2017. It's almost my anniversary, my 5-year anniversary with the museum. And what an archivist does, my daughter would tell you I work with a lot of old dirty stuff, is what she likes to say. But basically,
But not like old dirty people.
no, not old dirty
just
people.
like
No,
stuff.
just stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. But basically, an archivist takes care of paper stuff. So I take care of all the historical documents, all the photos, all the maps, all the books. Basically, anything that's not a 3D object is what I take care of. So that's what I do as an archivist. And it's not the same as an architect either, because people have asked me that before. And you don't want me to design a building, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. But there may be dirty old people in the architecture field.
There probably are some, I bet.
That's a bad joke. But this, when you say previously, maybe the oldest document may have been like mid-1800s. So we have the letters of William Chapman.
Yes.
Right? And so those letters are dated like 1846, 1847. So your reference was probably to that mid-1800s.
Yeah.
Kepler, why are you here on this panel today?
Well, I felt like I wanted to share my experience, especially working with Kelly here, and a lot of things she taught me about archives, and I felt like showing my experiences would be a very nice way of explaining how special of a day it is, especially for an archivist as special as Kelly.
Oh,
Oh,
thank
wow.
you, Kepler.
Okay, so she may be the special collection. I have a bad sense of humor, Kepler. But let me ask you in a very specific kind of way. When was that one day when you first came into the museum? You may have been a student, somewhere in a local school, or maybe you were in college and you came because you were looking for an internship of some sort. What was that first time you came to the museum like for you?
Well, the first time I ever came was when my older brother was in high school. I was quite young. I think it was like 5th grade. And I cannot say I remember many of the things I saw that day, but I do remember it's a vivid memory for me seeing for the first time the mammoth, Colombian mammoth skeleton we have here. And I was like, wow. And I still remember that to that day, and the little map I was given to get the stamps and return to the museum and get a prize at the very end. And I felt like that was a very wholesome moment for me as a part of my childhood. But it was I still remember my first time coming here as a university student, and recalling all those things and meeting all these amazing people, and little would I know it would be like one of the best times I ever had, extended periods of time I ever have experiencing here. So.
You graduated from the university already?
I did, yes.
Where did you go to high school?
I attended Thomas Jefferson T-STEM at PSJA. Yeah. That's where I did my high school career, as one could say.
Okay.
But,
and what year did you graduate from Jefferson School?
I graduated 2019.
2019.
So, yeah. Actually, I remember I think it was my freshman year when it was at Centennial, since it's one of the oldest buildings here in FAR, I think. Yeah.
Okay, but help me with the math here, because if you graduated in 2019, that means that you must have had 40, 50 college credit hours.
I did. My school was an early college high school, and I graduated from there with a Math Associates. Actually, very interesting story. I was a computer science major before, and I was hoping to take my career that way, but I came to realize my love for history and people, and that's one of the main reasons I made the change to anthropology. And here I am, almost. Wow, it's been a while, like 3 years already since I graduated.
Now, you told a story when you came into the studio earlier about how you were recently on some sort of archaeological mission or trip of some sort, right? Where was this, and what was that about?
So I was part of the UTRGV Field School, directed by Dr. Rowe and Dr. Duke. It was done at Dos Mangas, Ecuador, and basically we were studying the Valdivian culture, which was one of the cultures that developed in that area, and it was part of the I think it's a very imperative part of like an anthropological career, having a field school. Sadly, during COVID times, I couldn't go because everything got canceled, but thankfully I was able to tag along and have that amazing experience with such amazing people and mentors. Yeah.
So your college career would have been pretty extraordinary because most of it was during the pandemic.
It was actually my internship was my archives internship was throughout the pandemic, and I felt like for me it helped me a lot. I know that a lot of people had a lot of struggles, especially since they were like at home and couldn't really travel or do their daily life things. But thankfully, I feel like the internship allowed me to like keep some sense of a normal lifestyle coming here and just interacting with such tight community and working in projects.
So can I talk about that internship? Well, you had something to say. Go
I
ahead.
think we have a question over
There's
there.
a question. Okay. So there's a question here. Look at this. We have an assistant that brings questions. Okay, best way for potential researchers to get a hold of Kelly.
Okay.
All right.
Let me hang on to that, and
Yes.
I will answer all of that at the end. I will explain what you need to do if you want to contact Kelly, if you want to come for an appointment in the archives. I will go over all of that at the end. So let me hang on to that question so I don't forget.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So Kepler describes this experience of being an undergraduate student, and well, you heard what he said. What was it that he stepped into that was already designed by the archives here at the museum?
So we have had a partnership with UTRGV for a long time now. I've seen institutional records going back to the 90s where we had students that were coming over, usually anthropology students, but they can be from other departments. I know we've had history, and I think any department can do it, but it's a museum studies course, correct? And so they partner with, we're not the only ones, but they partner with local organizations, and it benefits both of them. The students get hours, and then the organization gets help. And I, instead of, when I did my master's degree, I did a practicum instead of doing a thesis. So I basically did an internship. So I understand what a valuable experience that is for people. So I try and in turn give that experience back to my interns. So we have various projects that they can work on. Some of students choose a particular project that they want to stay with all semester. Right now I have a student that's working on organizing our map room. But Kepler was one of those students that kind of got a little bit of everything. And I do think that was partially because of the pandemic, that, you know, we didn't have a lot of people that were coming into the office. We didn't have a lot of volunteers at that time or community service workers or anything like that. So Kepler did a little bit of everything. I know there were days that he went outside and helped Manuel in the gardens. And things like that. So he was great he was great working in the archives, but it was great that he was willing to step up and help out wherever he was needed at that time. So
That's terrific. Do you remember any stories, any specific stories that may have been very like archive, or was there some sort of collection that he was reviewing and that you had a conversation with him about?
I don't know if I have one, but I think Kepler has one. He remembers.
Yes, I do. I remember it was the first time that we were actually getting donated part of some of John Klausner, which was a sheriff in San Juan, during a very turbulent time, I remember.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and I was part of the experience of the whole donation process, and Kelly was like, oh, I really like that you're seeing this, because you're learning a lot of the process that a museum takes and the steps we take to, ensuring that this collection stays with us and it's going to be properly processed further time. And I don't know, that really stuck to me, not only because, it was a very interesting collection, but also of the things I learned that day, of how things are done in a museum and how we receive things. And hopefully, maybe in the future we might use those same collections into a display or something.
That's right. I remember this now. It was guns that had belonged to Tom Mayfield.
Oh, yes.
So, but yes, sheriff. So,
Sheriff,
yes.
my bad.
Law enforcement. Yes. And I am not a gun owner. I'm not a hunter. I'm not familiar with guns. So I do remember, being like, does anyone know anything about guns? Can you identify these for me? And so that was kind of a funny experience. But we got it figured out.
Yeah. Kelly, talk to us about the range of what an archive holds.
Well, we are the Museum of South Texas History, and so we collect anything from South Texas to northeastern Mexico. So really, we consider South Texas to be anything south of San Antonio, and sometimes our boundaries will spread beyond that a little bit here and there too. And so we take, anything of historical value from that range. And so it could be, like you mentioned, it could be oral histories, it could be private diaries, it could be, legal documents, it could be a little bit of anything. Something I've been working on recently is a recent donation that belonged to T.B. Waite Jr., and he was a World War II veteran who came home and then became the mayor of McAllen, and then later became a county judge. When I picked up this donation, it was funny because his daughter is the one that donated it to us, and she said that he accidentally became mayor of McAllen. And I thought, how do you accidentally become the mayor? But there is a newspaper article I found in the collection that says that there was a meeting. He was not present at the meeting, but they were basically trying to decide, hey, who should run for mayor? And everybody kind of thought, oh, T.B. Waite would be a great person to run for mayor. And they left the meeting and told him, oh, we decided you should run for mayor. And he was the only candidate that year. So he really did accidentally become the mayor of McAllen. And I think this was in it was late 40s when he was the mayor of McAllen. So,
and so he would have probably have been 30 years old. or a young guy.
He was pretty young, yes.
Wow, maybe even 20s.
Yeah, he had his daughter who donated the materials. She was born in 1943. I think she said she was born in March, and then in June he was shipped off to the Pacific Theater to fight in World War II. And then came back, and then, kind of immediately became mayor. So he
Wow.
had a very eventful decade.
It was a good decade for him. He saved the world, and then he had a child and the whole thing, and then became mayor.
And then accidentally
that?
became mayor, yes.
So the archives that we have here, those were pioneered by someone who was one of the founders of this museum. Can you speak to that? Can you speak to the influence of Margaret H. McCallum and the creation of this gift, for posterity?
Yeah, Margaret H. McCallum, like you said, she was one of the founders of the museum. And I think being part of the McCallum family, I mean, we live near the city of McAllen, so I think probably everybody's heard that name. She recognized the value of saving, family history, saving historical materials. And she kind of helped to found and create this archive. And now the archive is named after her. It's the Margaret H. McCallum Memorial Archives.
Mm. So, Kepler, you talk about being an anthropology student and the kind of academic work that you would have done, a lot of it through Zoom, probably,
Yes,
unfortunately. And then if you could do like this comparative kind of look at what it was like to do academic work, and then what it was like to be an intern
Mm-hmm.
at the museum, and actually getting your hands on stuff.
Yeah.
It was very historical.
That's the interesting part, because there were definitely moments where I was just flabbergasted. I'm like, wow, this is actually amazing to be holding this in my hands. Sure, I could do research and online and look for books and articles and get the information I need, but looking at the material itself that people actually have touched, these people that are engraved in history, I found that extremely amazing. And I don't know, I definitely, like I said, I was just blown away by the immensity of these items, and it's one of the major differences that I noticed from academic work and from my internship, just the deepness that doing the internship work had in my experience.
So, were there moments? I mean, you talked about the Mayfield collection, right? When you were wow, and then you even used the word flabbergasted, right?
Yeah.
You were flabbergasted. but were there moments that you, not flabbergasted, but moments where you thought, I think this may be something for me in the future?
Yes, there were plenty of moments at times. I will say that working in the archives was one of the most peaceful times I found for myself. There was a running joke between us that we don't get many visitors, but or we don't interact with the visitors as much as the other docents or the other members of the museum. But something about that was very relaxing to us, and I enjoy that because it really is you just doing the work and looking and organizing things is something satisfying about it, and I really enjoy that. Something I am thinking of probably doing.
Does that resonate with you, being out there in the archives?
It does, yes. Well, and like you said, there's a big difference between researching something and holding something in your hands, and that's what I love about my job, is that you get to hold history in your hands every day. When I did my internship, I worked with medieval manuscripts, and just thinking about, what that piece of paper had been through to travel to get to be in my hands. One of the, I think, most surprising experiences I've had here in the archives was the previous archivist had left kind of a lot of unfinished work for me. And so there were items in my office when I first started working here that I didn't know what they were, and just kind of gradually worked my way through them. And one day I unrolled this document and was trying to figure out what this is and figure out what to do with it. And it was a certificate appointing a gentleman as postmaster of Mercedes, and it was signed by William Howard Taft. And it was it appears to be an actual presidential signature. I'm not an expert on authenticating things, but it doesn't look like a stamp or anything. It looks like an actual signature. And to think to myself, wow, I'm holding something the president held in his hands. And now that's happened to me a few times. We just recently got a signed picture of Jimmy Carter. We have several Lyndon B. Johnson signatures. So it's a great part of the job to think.
Was there, my memory may be failing me here, but I thought that there was a Porfirio Diaz signature, the Mexican president.
Yes, there is.
There
Yes.
is?
Yes.
In what context? Do you remember?
I do not remember in what context, but yes, there is.
I want to say we saw that.
And there's a telegram from one of the Bushes.
George W.
Yes.
Bush. Yes.
Yes.
When Jose Cisneros came to inaugurate the Cisneros collection of artwork, Herbert Walker Bush, the elder, was invited, and he sent a telegram saying that Barb and I are sorry we can't be there. He said, Barbara Bush,
Yeah.
but that he sent his best to Jose Cisneros and the group at the museum.
Yeah, and we have that letter from Lady Bird Johnson where she was inviting someone to tea at the LBJ library, and
Yeah.
it's great.
That's pretty cool. So, Kelly, we have another question.
Okay.
So this is about public researchers and whether they're allowed to see or copy or scan archives in person, and what are the hours and how can that be arranged? So this may be a question that
Yes,
you want to leave for
we will save
when
that
you
till
go
the
through
end
that.
again.
Yeah. So a question for you, Kelly. So this is Ask the Archivist month, the month of October.
Yes.
Why would we have that? Ask the Archivist month. What's the importance there?
Well, Archives Month, and I can't remember, and I think it is on our website there where we did the post about the archives being closed this month. But
Wait, I'm sorry. It's Archives Month. It's
Yes,
Ask the
right.
Archivist
Plática
show.
is what we're doing
Plática,
right
that's
now, yes.
That's right. Yes.
So yes, October is American Archives Month, and it's just basically to raise awareness about archives and how, because a lot of people don't even know that archives exist, and to raise awareness about archives and what it is that we do, and give us the opportunity to kind of get out from behind the scenes, like Kepler said. We are very often kind of behind the scenes, especially me. I'm over in the jail all the time, and people don't even know I'm there. And get out and spread the word about archives and what it is that we do, and encourage people to utilize archives and to preserve their own family stories, their own personal stories, because they're such an important part of history. But people don't realize how even just, everyday things, Kepler's story about going to Ecuador, is going to have significance to somebody. But people don't realize that just your everyday lives can also be part of history. They always think, oh, I'm not a president. Oh, I'm not, an important figure. My stuff doesn't matter. But it's those everyday things that matter the most, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the reason that I wanted to share my story about my own archive of my parents is because, I think that one of the ways that we stay grounded in life, or one of the ways that we feel a sense of security and that sort of thing, is knowing who we are. And knowing who we are often really stems from the interaction we have with our parents, what we learn from our parents or our family about our own histories. And so I have found in my life that one of the most grounding sources in my life has been having had the great privilege to listen to my parents' stories and then to document those. To document those, I think, added an additional level, I think, of depth to my own understanding. And so my archive, my personal archive, gives me, I think, more depth, in my own mind at least.
I agree. And, when those young ladies were here the other day to look at the letters, the Dr. Garcia letters, they found...
Now, when you say young ladies, you mean a couple of 70-year-old women, right?
Yes,
But they're young
that's
ladies. That's good.
Yes, so they were here the other day.
But they were quite spry, though.
Yes, they
yes,
were.
They
They
my
were
God.
young ladies, yes.
Okay.
So they were here to look at the Dr. Garcia collection, which he had collected some gold coins, and we received those gold coins as a donation and all this documentation, but we also received a lot of his personal documents and personal correspondence. And these ladies, as you know, are relatives of Dr. Garcia, who has since passed away, but they came to look at the correspondence, and they found letters in there, and they were like, this was my grandmother, and this was my grandfather, this is my tia, and they were reading the letters and then laughing about how that's just like her, that was her sense of humor. So it was great. I mean, first of all, it was great for me because obviously I understand the significance of the letters, but being able to put, faces with them and personalities with them, and that it's not just a piece of paper, being able to recognize the person behind that piece of paper. And it was amazing to watch them connect with that family history. And, they remembered these people who are long gone, and for them to be able to relive those memories was so great to watch.
And my understanding is that at least one of them, Ileana, maybe the two of them, may want to do something like what Kepler did. Right?
Yes.
Like do an internship kind of thing, like volunteer work.
Yes. They are planning on coming back in December. After our reaccreditation, they are planning on coming back and looking at the letters more and helping fill in those gaps. They're going to in the meantime, they're going to make a family tree for me. And then they're going to come back, and most of the letters are in Spanish, so they're going to translate them for me and kind of, fill in the pieces, like here's what our family was doing at this time. That's what this letter is about. And
that's going to be such a
great
gift. Yeah. Wow. So there are a couple of other questions. So I'm going to see maybe if Kepler may want to. Yeah, actually, I don't know if Kepler's been around enough to know some of this, but somebody's asking anything related to 20th century Texas Ranger history. Oh my God, Texas Ranger history. So let's open up that very exciting can of worms.
That can of worms,
and then,
yes.
What does the archives offer for early 20th century? So two very good questions. They can be independent questions. And then the other question is about clarify the Garcia materials. So I'll take a shot at the Garcia materials, but Kepler, how about you start? I don't know if you know anything about 20th century Texas Ranger history that we may have, but you give it a shot, and then Kelly, you can go, and then I'll see if I can bring the rear on this. Go ahead.
Unfortunately, I don't think I can provide much information on any.
What kind of internship did you have?
A very exciting one. Oh my God.
You mean
God.
50
That's
years
okay.
worth of 50 years worth of museum collecting? You don't know all of it off the top of your head.
My bad, guys.
Yeah, he's not coming back to the show, I don't think. No, but you stay right here. Kelly, what do you know? What kind of Texas Ranger 20th century history or materials do we have here?
We do have 20th century Texas Ranger materials. We've got John Peavy. We've got plenty of other materials. We have Casimiro. Is it Perez Alvarez or Alvarez Perez?
Perez Alvarez.
Oh, thank you. So we do have Texas Ranger material. It's one of those things that people ask for pretty frequently. And now, along those lines, some of this correspondence I was talking about with the Dr. Garcia collection that Francisco's going to talk more about, but is from J.T. Canales, who, was involved with the Texas Rangers, maybe the positive side of the Texas Rangers, pointing out some of the negatives of the Texas Rangers. So we have some of those materials as well. So we kind of see it from both sides. Mm-hmm. And then what was the second question on there?
And then what does the archives offer for early 20th century?
So that's a very broad question, what we offer for the early 20th century. I would say definitely our strengths are agriculture, irrigation, early 20th century. We have a lot of photographs from that time period. We have the Magic Valley materials. So the once agriculture kind of became big in the valley, which started when John Klausner won a gold medal for his sugar cane, then it became the area to grow things, and it was marketed as the Magic Valley and tried to get people to move down here to grow their crops and things like that. So we have a lot of those kind of materials. We also have the scrapbook of Fern Catherine Welch, who was the first female sheriff's deputy in Hidalgo County. She was matron of the jail, not the jail that we have that's part of the museum. It was the jail that came after this. But then we also do have the materials about the founding of the town of Chapin, which is now Edinburgh, the construction of the jail that is now part of the museum. So there's a lot of early 20th century materials.
So it was called Chapin at the beginning.
It was called
Dennis
Chapin at the beginning, yes.
But then Dennis Chapin went and killed a Texas Ranger.
Yes. And
A guy named Roundtree. So we have some Texas Ranger history because the Texas Ranger was killed by Chapin. And so the town founders thought we can't have our town named after a killer, and especially somebody who killed a Texas Ranger. So they changed the name from Chapin to Edinburgh.
And speaking of Roundtree, we have a book written about Chapin by Roundtree's, I think, great nephew.
Right,
Yes.
right. Yeah, so that's an interesting book. And we've had a presentation done here about that. One of the fellows who was an early 20th century character of great consequence was a guy named Baker, A.Y. Baker. And so A.Y. Baker, Anderson Yancey Baker, who lived here in Edinburgh, came to South Texas as a Texas Ranger. And so A.Y. Baker, early in the century, killed two different men in Brownsville, De La Cerda brothers. And they were very dramatic kind of events that were horrific as well. And so we have some of Baker's history as a Texas Ranger, and then Baker becoming the county sheriff thereafter, and that sort of thing. Our reading room, and so this is actually a very good question about Texas Ranger history. Our reading room that Kelly manages in the archives is a reading room that has a very, very nice library where anybody could come in. The person who has the question, I'm sorry I don't have access to your name at the moment, but you can come in there and you can see a bunch of different resource material, not only archival, but secondary source material, books that have been written about, Texas Rangers and about other themes that maybe South Texas, Northeast Mexico related. I'll point out a few things that we have in the reading room. We have, for instance, Walter Prescott Webb's work, and so Webb wrote extensively about the Texas Rangers. Tom Leah wrote about the Texas Rangers, wrote about the King Ranch. We have at least one copy of Americo Paredes with his pistol in his hand, which is about the ballad of Gregorio Cortes. And Gregorio Cortes killed a man in the 1900, 1901, and then evaded what would be a posse of Texas Rangers coming after him. And so in Americo Paredes with his pistol in his hand is the whole narrative of the Texas Rangers, from both perspectives. We also have, I think we have, actually I'm not sure if we have it there, but I know that, I read this, a resource material on Matanza, which anybody can get now. And so there's books on the very turbulent and tumultuous time of the 1915 and 1918, 1919, with the killing of at least 300 documented Mexican or Mexican-American people, largely at the hands of the Texas Rangers, which was right in the middle of the Plan de San Diego, and how during the Plan de San Diego there was this derailing of a train where 3 railroad employees were killed. And so the backlash to that was the killing of a lot of people. And so that period is known as Matanza. And so the Matanza is what then J.T. Canales would step into to address the issue of the Texas Rangers and the ruthlessness. Now, understand Texas Rangers, it's a very complex story there, because the Texas Rangers were beloved by people who the Rangers protected. But they were not beloved by people who the Texas Rangers killed. So it's a complex history. And in fact, part of that history is also commemorated in the artwork of Jose Cisneros. And so we have one image of the Texas Ranger painted by Jose Cisneros, who, by the way, was very close to Walter Prescott Webb and J. Frank Dobie, who wrote about Texas Rangers, both historians and men of letters, folklorists also at the University of Texas back in the 1930s and 40s and 50s and 60s. They were friends with Cisneros. So Cisneros would get a lot of the Texana kind of stories and would paint them, draw them and paint them. And we have a very, very large Jose Cisneros collection of artwork that he actually was commissioned to paint for this museum between 1981 and 1998. And so embedded within that is a lot of themes around the Texas Rangers. So the mention and I think depth about 20th century Texas Ranger period, I think, is pretty deep here at the museum. Kelly spoke to what we have about early 20th century. I think it's fairly deep. I think the Peavy collection actually covers both. Peavy as a mounted, law officer and the Texas Ranger, but also what he left behind. He collected a lot of stuff. Peavy did. He would like canvass the newspapers of the time, and then write down the leading stories of the day. Like he's got entries about how, I think it was the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team had spring training in Brownsville, Texas, during the time that there was like the revolution, south of the border. So imagine that. A team, Major League Baseball team, would come down to South Texas to do spring training when there's a revolution going on. So how safe, how peaceful, how violent was it? It's a complicated story. The story of the Garcia materials, I think. So who's the person who asked the question? Pam, do you know? The person who asked the question. I'm just curious because I want to.
Leslie Torres.
Leslie?
Torres.
Leslie Torres. So Leslie, I'm going to tell you the story of the Garcia materials, but after we go on break, because I think, Leslie, you need to take a breath right about now, and we do too. So we're going to go on break for about maybe, I don't know, a minute or so, and then when we come back, we'll share the story of the Garcia materials, and then begin to wrap up our Plática.
Okay.
All right, so stay with us, Leslie, and everyone else. Welcome back, friends of the Museum of South Texas History. I think that as we began to respond to some of the questions, and thank you, audience, for sending in your questions and your comments. I missed out on a couple things. One that I especially want to point out about early 20th century history and even 19th century history is in the archival collection that we have of Al Ramirez, who was mayor of Edinburgh in the 1960s, and whose mother was Emilia Junior Ramirez. And Emilia, who, unfortunately died way too prematurely in, I think, October of 1960 at the age of 59. Emilia was a very powerful intellectual and wrote extensively, and even wrote a book that was about ranch life in Hidalgo County, like from the 1840s to the early 1900s. And it's a very, very useful book for us in this museum because we use a lot of her insight on ranch life to describe and to make sense of some of the exhibits that we have in both the Rio Grande River, the frontier, and also the highway exhibits that we have. And so Emilia Chuy Ramirez, we have a lot of her kind of, documents left within the Al Ramirez collection. So I wanted to point out Emilia Chuy Ramirez. What is it that you want to point out that may be some gaps here, either in how we have responded to the questions, or maybe in the experience that you had while you were here in the museum?
I just want to make it very clear that how impactful this experience has been for me. I know I've been going on about it, but I feel like there's really no words for me to describe how special it was for me to be working here for even though it was a short period of time. I really want to showcase how much development happened in my life thanks to this museum and the people I met here.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. Very generous. Kepler, appreciate that. Kelly, what about you? What are some of the gaps here that we're missing, or maybe something that you want to talk about that?
Well, I think one of the things that we haven't mentioned that we talk about a lot, but is the story of Freddie Gonzalez, which, Freddie Gonzalez was a Edinburgh. He was just a kid. He was 21 years old when he was killed in Vietnam, and won the Congressional Medal of Honor, and all kinds of awards were given to his mother after his death. His mother, Dolia, was a single mother, and he was an only child, so the relationship between the two of them was very close, and she continues to be a staple of the community. How old is she now? She's in her 90s, correct? 93. And she was just here at the museum recently, and she has had a relationship with the museum for a long time now, that she's donated a lot of his materials to us. We have the Freddie Gonzalez exhibit where we display his uniform and his medals, and she has recently, it was 2020 now, donated all the letters that he wrote home to her when he was serving in Vietnam. So it's over 100 letters, probably about 150 letters or so. And you told me the story of how she tried to donate these letters several times over the years and would walk in the door and burst into tears and just walk back out. So these are incredibly special to have. And they came just in a mismatched box. The letters weren't even paired up if there were multiple pages. So I spent the pandemic, I took that box home with me and I sorted through it and matched up the letters. And that meant I read every single one of them. And it was just very, very meaningful to work on that, while sitting at my dining room table with my own daughter, just a few feet away from me, and thinking about how heartbreaking that would be as a mother. And they're amazing. I mean, it tells the story of so many things. It tells the story of the Vietnam War. It tells the story of, a hometown kid who was proud of Edinburgh. It tells the story of this relationship between a mother and son. And those are a great addition to the collection. And then, just when you think Dolia doesn't have anything left to give us, then this year she gave us hundreds of photos. Well, she gave us rolls of film that we got developed with hundreds of photos from when he was serving in Vietnam. And I don't think we have those to share today, but we will soon, hopefully. I have scanned them all. I just have to get them up online. But she just keeps giving us more and more of Freddie's materials. Just when you think she's run out, she surprises us with more.
The Freddie Gonzalez letters have been such a gift. Kelly, you and I have worked on those, and the museum really has worked on those with special care, because in its totality, it is such an expression of love from a son to a mother. Never mind the story of the valor and the courage and earning a Congressional Medal of Honor. The merit on its own humanity of writing to his mother just about every single day is an absolute thing of beauty. There's a letter, and so Pam, if you can pull it up, there's a letter that's dated December 7th, 1967, that sent us into kind of like this frenzy. So I remember when I read that letter, December 7th, 1967, where Freddie says, Mom, a disc jockey came to interview me at the camp. And so, Mom, it's going to be played, she says. He says, it's going to be played, and the letter is right in front of you right there. It's being shown on the screen. It's going to be played on KRIO, he said. I don't know when, but stay close to the radio, Mom. Or call them, because maybe they'll tell you when it's going to be on. And so, between between the year 2020 when we got this and 2022, we scrambled about looking for that thing, for the cassette recording of that interview. And we couldn't find it until somebody one day walked into the museum with a cassette.
Yes.
Somebody walked in.
Who didn't even know we were looking for it.
No.
It was just completely random.
No, that's right. But it became like this archival source for us that helped us understand Freddie differently now, because we all knew of Freddie through images, through letters, through the medals. But what was his voice like? You want to hear it, Kipper?
I would love to, actually.
So Tony, I'm going to try this. I'm going to take a risk here, but I'm going to play the recording, okay? And so I'm going to elevate it here to the microphone because I have a boom mic up here for friends of the museum, and I'm going to play it. But I'm going to give you a warning here, so to the audience, that it's very hard to make out because it's right in the middle of bombs being, sent to the. Shot at Freddie's camp. And so there's this reporter there who is interviewing Freddie. And so this is only about a 3.5 minute interview. So I'm gonna show the first maybe 15, 20 seconds. I'm gonna play the first 15, 20 seconds. And then there's bombing and everything becomes sort of disheveled. And then they come back at the end. And so the first part is the reporter introducing himself and saying, I'm here talking to Sergeant Alfred Gonzalez. And then he says, your friends call you Al? And he says, no, he says, yeah, they call me G. Oh, they call you G? Yeah, they call me G. So how long have you been out here? In Cantien. And so then Freddie responds, but just the voice of Freddie. Just the voice of Freddie. So what do you think, Tony? Do I play it now? Give it a shot? All right. So I'm going to play it.
Speaking with Sergeant Alfred Gonzalez from Edinburgh, Texas. Please call you Al. They call me G. How long have you been up here? We've been here 3 weeks. Not taking 2 weeks. We've been here before.
So friends call you Al? Yeah, they call me G. Oh, they call you G. How long have you been up here? Pretty cool.
It's crazy. It has some kind of swag to it.
It's got swag.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is like
friends call me G.
Because friends call me G.
And so actually, one of the interviews that this museum did with actually Pam interviewed this one Marine who served with Freddie, and he said I had the privilege to be able to call him Sergeant G. I think is what it was, because there were like levels, and so. Oh no, he called him G. Others called him Sergeant G, the ones who were at the bottom.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then this thing happens, right? Very kind of like a bomb hits, and then the reporter is like, he's lost in himself, and then he said, "What was I asking you?" And Freddie remembered. He said, "You're asking about my parents," and then he said, "Oh, okay. Well, who are your parents?" And then Freddie explains who his mother is, and so it's gonna get to that here in about maybe 5 seconds, and then the tail end of the interview.
106.
They laugh, they're having a good time, and then, what was I asking you?
What did I ask you last? You were saying, who are your parents? My mother's Mrs. Gonzalez.
Bombs.
You know where the key now? She lives at 817 West Mall, Edinburgh, Texas. Anything you'd like to say to her here at Christmas time? Merry Christmas and have a Happy New Year. Okay, thank you. You're welcome. Sergeant Alfred Gonzalez from Edinburgh, Texas. This is Gene Kraft at Cantien.
And I'm so glad we were able to find that, and it kind of completes Freddie's story, and that we were able to play it for Dolia as well, so she could hear his voice again.
And not only did we play it, I mean, I played it at her house, but then we brought her to a public program, and we sat her up front, and we played the thing in front of the public, and she was so happy, that other people, are taking an interest in her letters. I mean, a lot of people have taken an interest in her letters, but I think that we're very intentional about taking an interest in her letters just as much as we take an interest in her, because Dolia really is the one to preserve. I mean, Freddie clearly, but Dolia, we need to preserve and present.
Yeah.
And I think, Pam, that you showed other letters, and so the last two letters that Freddie wrote to his mother, so one of them was dated January the 24th, 1968, and so he died on the 4th of February. And so the one dated January the 24th is a very poignant letter that I think is like classic American literature. So this letter here, where he's writing about Victor, who he grew up with here in Edinburgh, Victor Espinosa. And so the first paragraph, he says, "I was shocked to hear that Victor got killed, but it's things that will happen in war. Mom, don't worry about me. Remember what I said to you before I left, that I would come back all right. I hope all the people back home remember Victor, because he didn't give his life for nothing." And then he said, I can't see it too well, but he says something like, his life was not given willingly, Pam? Is that what it says? Yeah. His life was given willingly rather than taken. His life was given willingly rather than taken. That's the way I want you to think. That's what he says to his mother. And then he would get killed just a few days later. Pam, go to the next one, the one dated January 26, 1968. So this is the last letter he sent. And so in this letter, he says, "Hi, Mom." So it's not mother, so tone immediately. Right? "Hi, Mom. A short letter to let you know that I am just fine. I am going on R&R the 29th of February to Hong Kong. Me and Sam Reina are going together," he says. "I'm also sending a couple of pictures."
This could be the pictures that we just got this
We
past
just
year.
got picked.
Not this past year, the rolls of films she gave us. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Could be.
And then, "Well, Mom, guess this will be all for now. Bye for now. Write soon. Send another package. The Mexican candy was real good, Mom." That's the last letter he wrote to his mother. The Mexican candy was real good. Write soon. Kepler. Freddie kept writing about how he wasn't getting enough letters from back home.
It's,
Mom, write. Mom, I haven't gotten a letter in 2 weeks.
maybe he wanted more of that Mexican candy.
Yeah,
I feel like
the
a mom
candy
would
for
do.
sure.
Yeah.
He would say to his mother, "Mom, can you please send stamps? Send paper. I'm out of paper. Send envelopes." That's how much he wrote, that he wore through his supplies. That's special. That's
And we don't write letters anymore. It's texts and emails, and it's a lost art.
So I get a call one day, Kepler, and so this is a story for, was it Leslie? Leslie, I think. So got a call from Judge Leticia Hinojosa one day about how she wanted me to go to her house because there was going to be a social function at her house where she was going to have a guest, a fellow by the name of Sergio Rodriguez. And so I went to the judge's house, and so Sergio Rodriguez was there, but so were a bunch of other people at the judge's house, Leticia Hinojosa. And so I wasn't quite sure why I was being invited, except for to meet some people. Maybe, as the CEO of the museum, I would go and just do some socializing. And so I thought, well, the judge wants me to show my face as kind of a new CEO of the museum and meet some people and that sort of thing. No, but it turned out that the reason she wanted me there is because she was lobbying Sergio Rodriguez for something to come down to South Texas. And that something was gold. So here's the story. Sergio Rodriguez's aunt and uncle, Hector Lopez and Gloria Lopez, who were born and raised in the towns of Oilton, San Diego, and Alice. Hector was from Oilton. Gloria was from San Diego. They would go to the University of Texas back in the 1940s. Hector would go off to war. Gloria would get a degree in French, and they would settle in Alice, where he would become an oil and gas attorney, became very, very successful. Gloria's father, however, Gloria's father from San Diego was a man who was born in 1875. His name was Jose Garcia. He was born in a border town. He went off to Monterrey to go to college, and then he went to medical school in Mexico City and became a physician. And his first and only job was as a town doctor, a country doctor in San Diego, Texas. And he started his tenure there in the year 1900. Well, Dr. Garcia would be the small town doctor, and Dr. Garcia also did something else. He had kind of an idiosyncrasy of sorts. He liked to buy gold. So Dr. Garcia began to collect gold in the early 1900s. Dr. Garcia also fell in love with this woman named Maria Canales. He married her. They had a child in the year 1910, a child named Eligio, who had special needs. And Maria would die right after she gave birth to Eligio. Maria happened to be the sister of J.T. Canales, who we mentioned. J.T. Canales was the fellow who wrote legislation to try to curb the oppressive practices of the Texas Rangers early in the 1900s, when he was in the state legislature. J.T. Canales, very accomplished. He had gone off to the University of Michigan to become a lawyer. This is back in the 1800s. J.T. Canales from Brownsville, Texas. So J.T. Canales' sister married El Doctor Garcia. She died. So El Doctor Garcia, would be a widower with a child. Well, El Doctor Garcia would then marry another woman who was she was a widow herself, and brought one child with that marriage. And that one child was Gloria. Brought several children, but one of those kids was Gloria. So Dr. Garcia now marries Tomasita. They have their family in San Diego. Dr. Garcia continues to buy gold. 1929, the global markets crash. The Great Depression begins. By 1933, the world is in chaos. The economies of the world are unstable. And in 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt signs an executive order to collect all the gold in the country, to try to control the currency markets. And so the federal government now has an express duty to purchase at under market value the gold of anybody out there in the country. Well, during that time, we see that a lot of Americans sent their gold abroad. Some Americans hid their gold, including Dr. Garcia. Dr. Garcia buried his gold under his house.
It gets better.
Real men's treasure.
And so he buries the gold under his house, right? And he does it in a very secretive way, so he doesn't tell people. Well, Dr. Garcia continues to practice medicine in San Diego, Texas. And in 1950, he's kind of forced into retirement. He's 75 years old. He's really began to lose some of his mental faculties. But Gloria takes him in. Gloria married to Hector. Hector, oil and gas attorney, World War II veteran. They live in Alice, Texas. Dr. Garcia goes and lives with him. Late in life, Dr. Garcia pleads with his daughter to go find the gold in this house in San Diego, Texas. Mija, ve a buscar el oro. And Gloria was like, what? What gold? So Gloria sends Hector, and Hector takes a couple buddies, and they go to the house, and with metal detectors, they look for the gold, and they don't find a thing. The gold was under the house. In the 1970s, about 1976, this is like 13 years after Dr. Garcia dies, because he died about 1963, more or less, 1964. And he, by the way, leaves the house to Gloria. And in the will, where he leaves property to Gloria, there's a clause that says that any value in that property, even under the property, belongs to Gloria. He dies 1963, 1964. Gloria holds on to the house. In 1976, Gloria sells the house to this fellow from San Diego. This fellow from San Diego, who will go nameless now, but this fellow from San Diego lives in the house, and about the year 2000, this is maybe, I don't know, maybe 14 years after he bought the house, he's got a plumbing problem. So he calls the plumber, the town plumber. Town plumber comes, digs under the house to get to the main water line or whatever, and he hits gold. And he grabs the gold. And he keeps it. He keeps it. And he's very secretive about it. Eventually, the owner of the house finds out that this guy had gotten gold from under the house. And he claims the gold, the owner of the house. And they go back and forth, and they get into like some sort of like legalistic kind of conflict. There's a lawsuit. So the owner of the house is suing the plumber. The plumber says, no, finders keepers, he says. The owner says, well, I'm going to sue you. So he sues him, and it gets in the news, and Gloria finds out. Gloria lives in Alice, Texas. Mm-hmm. Gloria finds out, and when Gloria finds out, she says, that's my daddy's gold. It makes sense now. But they won't give her the gold. So Gloria takes both of them to court, and she wins the gold. So Gloria died last year in 2021, and she left in her will the gold and the documents pertinent to the gold. And documents pertinent to the gold and to the family story include letters of J.T. Canales that he wrote to Dr. Garcia, and a bunch of other documents that are very, very interesting, that are very revealing of South Texas history. And so this museum has the gold now, because in that will, it says that the executor, Sergio Rodriguez, will find a museum that he can trust, where he can deposit the gold. And he found that he can trust his museum, and he likes his museum, and he likes that this museum can tell the story of the gold and of Dr. Garcia, and of Hector and Gloria Lopez. So the story clarified the Garcia materials. The Garcia materials are part of the gold story. But the Garcia materials, in many ways, are a multi-textured narrative that tells the story of the South Texas family. Because not only did they leave Gloria and Hector Lopez, not only did they leave the gold and the documents, they also left a bit of a fortune to found a foundation, to create a foundation to give out scholarships to first-generation kids from South Texas. And Sergio is managing that under the foundation that is the Hector and Gloria Lopez Foundation, which really comes in direct kind of like what is lineage, as part of the story of Dr. Jose Garcia. So the Garcia story, the gold story, the scholarships, the J.T. Canales, it's all kind of this tapestry that creates a really beautiful narrative of a family and of a community and a part of history, that's South Texas history. And so we are in the process of developing an exhibit that we will be inaugurating sometime in the summer of 2023.
And this is the young ladies that came the other day.
Yes,
are part of this story as well, and they're going to hopefully help fill in some of the gaps in the story for us. So
yeah. So I'm exhausted just telling that story. Oh my God, it's like, ha.
Well, since you're exhausted, let me answer my questions. Please. Finally. Yes. So one thing nobody asked, but I do want to talk about, is how you can go about becoming an intern at the museum, like Kepler did. And so it is for students through UTRGV. It's through the museum. It's a museum studies course. So that's how you would do that internship, where you would get college credit for it. But we do take volunteers. And so, if you're interested in that, feel free to contact us. Yes, the museum is open for researchers. Now, we don't generally let researchers see the archive storage room. Generally, you tell me ahead of time what you want to research, and I pull the materials from the storage room and you look at it in the reading room. We do tours of the storage room. Sometimes I actually have a class coming at the beginning of November for a tour. I usually get a couple classes a semester that they like to come and just introduce, the professors like to introduce their students to the idea of using archives for research. The archives is closed for the month of October, for Archives Month. It is a chance, we did this last year and it was a very productive month, so we decided to repeat it again. It gives us a chance to just catch up on work. We are constantly getting donations, constantly have, we also keep track of the museum generated materials, and obviously we never stop doing stuff here at the museum. Donations never stop coming in, so there's always work to do. So October gives me a chance to kind of get caught up on all of that stuff. So we will reopen again for our normal hours again in November. We are by appointment only. I am the only archivist, so I definitely need to have advance notice that people are going to come in and see me, so I can plan for that. We are open for research on Tuesdays and Fridays from either 10 to 12 or 1 to 3. And then the best way to contact me is you can call me at the museum or you can email me, and I'm sure Pam can probably make that magically appear on the screen for us. But the number at the museum is 956-383-6911, or my email address is kfrancis-love@mosthistory.org. So if you are interested, please contact me and we can see what we can do.
Thank you, Kelly. I think that we're beginning to wrap up here. So, I thought, well, I didn't think, but I was going to say that maybe we'll do this in about 20 minutes. You know that we've gone well over an hour. We've gone like an hour plus. But Kepler, last words from you, as a way to close. Maybe, where you are in life and what you're maybe envisioning in life and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, at the moment, I really, like you said, for anybody who's interested in the internship, especially at UTRGB, I think it'll be a great opportunity if you give yourself a time to at least try and apply. I think it's a great experience. Secondly, at the moment, I am between jobs, currently working as a ATV. And my future plans for the future is hopefully start a master's program, either in anthropology. I'm still not sure in what way I'm gonna take that, but yeah, those are the future plans, and I'm hoping that great things will come my way.
All right. Well, thank you for being on the program.
No, thank you for having me.
It.
Really appreciate it.
Kelly, last words.
I just want to encourage people, like I said, everybody's history is important. If you have materials that you might be interested in donating, feel free to contact us, contact me and let me know. And I just encourage you to preserve your own family history in whatever ways you can. If you have family photographs, make sure you label them on the back. Just write people's names and the dates and maybe what event it is, if you know. And Francisco's gone above and beyond in doing oral histories with his family. But those stories are important to tell. So make sure you save them.
Good. Well, we hope you've enjoyed today's Museum Pláticas, and you may or may not know that we do Museum Pláticas once a month, but this month it looks like we did 2, because today was Ask an Archivist, and so we have an archivist and we have somebody who interned in the archives here at the museum. So keep up with the programming, and you're seeing this live, and you may also see it recorded if you get online and see it. But if you're seeing this live, I would like to announce that on Saturday we have, in partnership with the City of Edinburgh, a huge party. They're calling it a block party. It's Los Muertos Bailan block party that's going to go all the way from City Hall up to 12th Street, which is where the museum is. Yeah, what is it? Yeah, 12th and McIntyre. And so it's going to go all the way up across the creamery, and then there's a brand new amphitheater that's being inaugurated here in the next couple of days. and then all the way to City Hall. And so it's going to be this great, block party. It's going to have thousands of people, and the museum is going to be open, and it'll be free, and there's going to be all kinds of food trucks and all kinds of like Dia de los Muertos, Dia de Muertos kinds of, costumes, calaveras and catrinas and competitions and then performances. And we're going to have a bunch of folklorico performances, and mariachis will be all over the place. It's going to be like euphoric.
That's a good,
It's a good word, right? That's a good word.
Yes.
All right, so we hope you can join us. Come to the museum, and come not only this Saturday, but come to the museum often. We'd love to have you here, and we love it when people become friends of the museum as well. So with that, I will sign off and thank Kelly and Kepler once again, and thank you to our tech team, Tony Peña and Pam Morales de Hendricks, behind the computer and behind the camera. So we'll see you next time. Thank you.